So a lot of times when you start learning the Spanish subjunctive, people tell you that you have to use it when you're talking about hypothetical situations or when you are expressing certain emotions. But that's not really how it works. I actually think that makes it even more confusing. Here's how it really works. So the Spanish subjunctive mostly happens in noun clauses and relative clauses. So what are those things? A noun clause is a subordinate clause that behaves like a noun. I know that Peter lives here. That Peter lives here is the subordinate clause and it's behaving like a noun. I know this thing. In Spanish, yo sé que Peter vive aquí. And then a relative clause is a subordinate clause that modifies a noun. Peter lives in a house that was built in 1970. That was built in 1970 is the relative clause. And it modifies the noun house, just like an adjective would modify it, as in Peter lives in a red house, for example. So a noun clause behaves like a noun, a relative clause modifies a noun. And here's where the subjunctive actually happens in these structures. So in noun clauses, it happens when we use certain verbs in the main clause. And these verbs in the main clause, we can group them by meaning. And here's where the confusion often comes. So we have verbs of uncertainty, like dudar, to doubt, verbs of desire, like querer, to want, and verbs of influence, like sugerir, to suggest. So if the subject of both clauses is the same person, we use the infinitive in the noun clause and the subjunctive doesn't get triggered. Yo quiero ir a la fiesta. I want to go to the party. But if I want you to go to the party, in Spanish we have to phrase it, I want that you go to the party. And in this case, when we have a different subject in the subordinate clause, using this verb in the main clause, will trigger or induce the subjunctive in the subordinate clause. Yo quiero que tú vayas a la fiesta. And same with the other verbs, dudar and sugerir. Yo dudo que tú vayas a la fiesta. Yo sugiero que tú vayas a la fiesta. And then with relative clauses, we have two main uses of the subjunctive. When we use cuando as a relative adverb, if it refers to the future, it always triggers the subjunctive. When you go to the party in the future, remember to call me. Cuando vayas a la fiesta, en el futuro, recuerda llamarme. And then in relative clauses with que, we have the option of using the subjunctive if we want to create what we call the suspension of the reference. So let's say that I'm telling you that next year I'm moving into an apartment that has a terrace and is cheap. I can say that I'm moving into un apartamento que es barato y tiene terraza, without the subjunctive. In that case, it is understood that I'm talking about an actual apartment that exists in real life and that I've probably already seen. But if I tell you that I'm moving into un apartamento que sea barato y tenga terraza, the reference of the noun apartamento, and the reference is the extralinguistic entity that exists in real life, like the actual apartment, gets suspended. I'm not talking about a specific apartment. It's kind of like saying into an apartment that will hopefully be cheap and will hopefully have a terrace. So that's all I have today. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.